National Letter of Intent Signing Day 2015. It's all presented to you by United Bank. And once again, we're with you up until 1 o'clock this evening, this afternoon, I should say. We'll be going through the recruiting class, bringing you up to date. In a little bit, we'll be joined by WVU assistant coaches. We're delighted to be joined right now by the man who just started the new gig here earlier this week. Shane Lyons, West Virginia University's new athletic director, is with us. Shane, I know it's a very, very busy time for you. Thanks so much for spending some time with us.
It was great to be here this morning, for sure.
First of all, let me ask you this. I mean, it has got to be just an absolute mind spinner when you get into a position like this. You come in on Monday, you sit down, and there's work that has to be done initially. So You're trying to say, okay, what needs to be signed, what needs to be dealt with immediately, and plus at the same time, hey, let's go meet a couple hundred people that you're going to have to deal with, on a regular basis.
Right.
How's the approach? What do you do when you come in and start to get going?
Well, you try to pace yourself a little bit, but you're right. There's a lot of names, there's a lot of issues. Things got to keep moving forward, so you just kind of have to go with that pace. And it's kind of good the first several weeks here, or actually months. My family won't be here, so it allows me to immerse myself into the job, try to learn it, try to see what the issues are, meet people. So it's all been very good. I mean, obviously the last couple of days, it's, as I told you earlier, it's like drinking from a fire hose, but it's going well.
The kids are going to stay back, finish up school, and then you'll make the move.
They will. We've made that decision since they'd already started school back in Alabama to finish there and then come up here after spring semester.
This is a huge, huge day, obviously, in the world of football as the National Letter of Intent Day gets underway. You've seen it from all different aspects. When you take a look at your resume, you have seen it as a member of a compliance group when you were at Texas Tech. You've seen it from a conference office when you were with the ACC. Obviously, most recently at the University of Alabama. So you've seen this whole thing grow. You've been in the business now, 30-plus years going on that. This thing has become a huge event. I mean, to think about what we're doing here, let alone 5 hours today, and everyone's kind of blowing this coverage out. What do you think it means to us, and why do you think it's kind of morphed into such a huge event?
Well, I think recruiting, it's just not a 2-month process. It's a couple-year process, and these highly recruited student athletes out there, you're trying to, recruit them for 2 years from an academic and athletic standpoint, and this is just the culmination of all of it. It's gotten, with technology, the social media, being able to talk more about those prospects, what they have to do. When I was in school, we didn't have all the video and the huddles and to be able to see all that. It was the 8mm tapes. Mm-hmm. But now with the technology, it's you can see the prospects, you get to know them earlier on. So I think that's what's made it a bigger deal around the country.
And when you start to think about it, the significance and the importance. I mean, this becomes the lifeblood as to whether or not your program is going to have success. I mean, if you don't get it right here for a year or 2 years, I mean, it ultimately it not only has effect for a football program. Football obviously is the heart of the entire department. It can bring down schools if the football program doesn't go well.
Yeah, no question. So these are important. This is an important day. These coaches have worked hard. They've reviewed tapes, they've been in person, they've seen them, they've talked to them, their parents. So, there really is not much room for mistakes. You got to make sure those kids you're signing are going to fill the holes that you need to as a team, and you hope you do it right.
Let's talk a little bit about the compliance aspect. I mean, that's kind of where you got to start. This is a big day for compliance as well. This whole process is huge, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, from a compliance standpoint, actually, this is one of their favorite days because all the recruiting things is over with. So all the calls you get from everybody else, your coach is doing this and your coach is doing that, that finally ends today where you finally have that piece of paper that comes through in the fax machine and says, hey, that person is committed to West Virginia and we're happy about it. Now it's time to move forward.
One of the things I'd like to ask you about is, as a guy who spent a lot of time in that Alabama athletic department, there's 2 things I'd like to ask you. First of all, I know guys who have coached with Nick Saban, and they've told me just how intense things can get in those hours leading up to National Signing Day. So I wanted you to briefly talk about any differences there might or might not be from program to program, because you've seen a lot at this time of year. And the other thing I want to ask you is, in that athletic department at Alabama, the last week of August last year, heading into Atlanta, how much flack were you catching? And with your ties to West Virginia?
Well, I mean, I think everybody was asking who you're cheering for and all that. Well, obviously, it's turned back to West Virginia now. Yeah. There's no question. But no, honestly, actually, it helped me a lot for Coach Saban being from West Virginia. So he had the same issues that I had. So we didn't have to worry about that. But no, it's intense. I mean, I think it's across the country intense. As I said, it's a matter of really recruiting, throughout a couple of years and having that now the culmination day come about. But I think it's really no different from campus to campus. The pressures and all of your work goes into this one day, and it depends upon a 17-year-old signing that piece of paper. The kids have made it a big deal for themselves and their families of where they're going to sign. So you're really not sure until, as I said earlier, that piece of paper comes through, and you make sure that they put their name on that paper and sign for you.
We're visiting with WVU Athletic Director Shane Lyons here on our National Letter of Intent Signing Day. The full cost of attendance has become the new buzzword in college athletics, and I think probably a year or 2 years ago, for those that weren't intimately involved in it, they wouldn't even have an idea of what it all means. But obviously, legislation has been brought forward. Legislation is moving in all of those directions, that colleges now will be fully responsible for the full cost of attendance. Let's talk a little bit about that, because one cost of attendance at one school could be entirely different from a cost of attendance at another school. First, from the big picture, Shane, the Big 12, obviously as a Power 5 conference school, has its thoughts on this process. How will it impact specifically the league? How does it impact WVU?
Well, I think it's everybody, and the big thing is trying to figure out what those dollars and cents mean from school to school. And that's the issue that we're wrestling with right now among institutions, because the cost of attendance is set obviously by each institution. Those numbers vary from campus to campus, and I think the prospects and individuals look at it that, well, if I go to this school, I get more dollars in my pockets than if I go to this school. In reality, obviously, it's based upon the cost in that area, the housing, the food cost. So that's what people are wrestling with right now, and in some cases it can be $1,000, $1,500 difference from school to school, and that's something that we have to continue working through and making sure that we're in the right situation as West Virginia and be able to educate our student athletes coming in that they will have extra resources to be able to fulfill their needs when they're here on campus.
Shane, do you think it could become a recruiting ploy, so to speak, from one school to another? Say, hey, why go there? Because if you come here, you're going to get X, Y, or Z?
Oh, no question. I think it's already happened. Before I came here, it was already happening in the recruiting trail. The coaches at Alabama, and I'm sure it was happening here at West Virginia, we're already saying to each other, well, if my student athlete goes here, they get $2,500, but if you go to your school, you're going to get $3,500. So yeah, I think it's out there in the recruiting trail, no question, and coaches are going to use that. But I think we have to educate our coaches and our student athletes that the funds that we're giving them are going to be adequate to cover their needs once they get here in Morgantown.
Let's jump ahead to another topic in regards to recruiting from the administrative side. There is the move, or at least the conversation going on for an early signing period. Basketball has had it now for years, and what has happened is the April signing period that used to, kind of be in existence, which was the big time, now is kind of a quiet time, and November is when really the bulk of the signings done. Give me your thoughts on an early signing period for football, like or not?
Well, it's been around for a long time, Tony, and that discussion, and back in my conference days, I was, very involved in those discussions. There's pros and cons to it, and I think that's what people are trying to weigh. And what we don't want to happen is having an early signing period. Is do you move the recruiting cycle completely back further? And I think these young men and young women, they're being recruited in all of our sports. It's starting earlier and earlier, and what we don't want to do is keep pushing that back. In some senses, you're recruiting an 8th and 9th grader. So we don't want to get it too early. So I think it's continued to be talked about and making sure that you have a balance. I would think, like to see, like we do with a lot of other sports, is having an early signing period in football and then later on having the normal signing period. So those young men who already know where they want to go and they've committed to that institution, go ahead and let them sign, and then let the coaches focus on those remaining spots that they have to fill, come the normal signing period.
You alluded earlier on that the full cost of attendance is getting conversation that is going back and forth as to, how do you kind of legislate this or try to bring some equality to it? What's the next big piece or the next major factor out there in how coaches are recruiting? You mentioned earlier on, social media has changed the way things go. is it ever going to be able to be kind of put into a box, or is it always going to kind of always be like the octopus that's got so many different tentacles? If they close one door, they're going to come around the other door. That's what it is. Isn't it?
I've been around this a long time, and I tell you, we from a legislative point, you think you put things in a box and have it tight, and coaches are very creative, and there's no question that we want to go to the gray area. So that's why legislation, that's why compliance people, I've always said, has a job security for life, because coaches are creative, and the questions start being asked of what we can and cannot do, and that box starts getting bigger, and as you said, the tentacles start going out further. So then we try to wrap our arms back around it and try to figure out, what is best for that sport in recruiting. So, I don't think it's a cat and mouse game. I think with technology, we don't know where it's going to head. With social media, things are ever evolving. So how we get our arms around that, I'm not sure. And I think it's something that we have to stay on top of, look at, and how do we legislate it, and making sure, we have a balance for our coaches as well. I mean, recruiting is very intense, and they need, to have time where there's dead periods where they don't have to focus on that. They can focus back here on campus with their own student athletes, as opposed to continuing focusing on, recruited prospects.
Along that line, so the Power Five comes together and is going to create its own series of legislation and their own policy, and this is the way that we want to run. They'll continue to get stronger and stronger. There's no argument about that. Do you see at a point where there will be significant changes among the Power Five that will embolden them even farther than the non-Power Five conferences? In other words, could we see a time, Shane, where the Power Five say, hey, guess what? We want to be out on the road recruiting more. We've got the finances. We've got the money. We don't have to worry anymore about the schools that financially were, quote unquote, holding us back, that didn't have the finances. That's why we're here as the Power Five. Do you see it perhaps getting even stronger and, so to speak, less of a control than there is now?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I do think the autonomy gives the ability for the Power Five conferences to legislate what they think is best for those institutions. At the same time, I think there's a balance that those schools want to keep in place. I think that the concern, as you just alluded to, Tony, is how far do you start separating yourself from those other institutions out there? So even within the Power Five, we saw a little bit here in the autonomy and the cost of attendance, and some of the other legislation we just had in January is, there was still those in the Power Five that had a different view than some of the others in the Power Five. So I don't think we're in a perfect system where the Power Five all agrees upon each other, saying, hey, this is what's best for us. I think you're going to still have that varying degrees of concern among some of the Power Fives against the others. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. But I think, just like in the past, there's a lot of debates that go on with legislation, and I think those debates will continue within the Power Five.
Shane, what do you think are the next big hot topic points that are going to be addressed? We just had the convention last month, and the cost of attendance goes through. What's the next big obstacles or challenges that the Power Five wants to address?
I think it's still continued discussion of just what we talked about, the cost of attendance. It's working through now, the devil's in the details. So, I think the most important thing is we'll continue looking at the student-athlete welfare. What's best for the student-athlete, from concussion management, which we talked about in January at the convention, the cost of attendance, those type of issues, and getting it now into the nuts and bolts of those. So I think those type of discussions will continue, and what we can do to provide those more incentives to the student athletes in the future.
Go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just going to say, Shane, you were on staff in the compliance department at Texas Tech in the late 90s. So you were there when Mike Leach and his whole crew arrived in 2000, 2001. What that means is you've had a familiarity with the name Dana Holgorsen since the first day Dana ever stepped on a major college campus. So with that as your frame of reference, a decade and a half to draw from, what does the name Dana Holgorsen mean to you when you hear that in college football?
Well, without question, Dana came in at Texas Tech and did a great job from the offensive side. So when I think of Dana Holgorsen, I think of offense. And, I think that's played throughout his career, and I think it plays here at West Virginia, what he's done with the offense and how he can move the ball up and down the field. So that hasn't changed in the 15, 20 years I've known Dana, and I think that will continue. So it's exciting to, for the fans, for us to see that ball move up and down the field and score points. So that's when I think of Dana, that's what I think of as offense.
Let's jump back in here to WVU. We mentioned earlier on that a lot's coming at you right now. If you could kind of go back from your introductory press conference when you came in here on the weekend during the basketball season, and you kind of laid out your framework. I'm going to go through a 90 to 120 day evaluation and just kind of have a bunch of eyes looking out there and seeing what I want. But since that press conference, you've obviously had so much time now to kind of at least think, hey, here's my opportunity, here's my chance, this is the job that I've always wanted. It's my first athletic director's job, although you've got just a wealth of experience in the entire field of athletics. What are your foundation points going to be when people say, hey, this is the legacy or this is the definition of Shane Lyons' athletic department? What is that kind of an athletic department?
Well, without question, and I said this in my press conferences, I want to run a department first and foremost with integrity. That's on and off the field. So without question, and I came through here yesterday talking to the football coaches, and it's just, let's do it right. And if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right, and making sure that we don't have issues, after the fact with the NCAA. So that's first and foremost, is making sure that culture is we're going to do it right, working with the compliance. And that probably comes from a compliance background of saying, ask the questions. We're all in this together, and that kind of goes with the other values, collaboration. It's a team. It's just not Shane Lyons running this department. It's everybody running this department. Everybody has their areas that they're in charge of. The other point is innovative. Let's look at things of doing things a new way. So really those three things I want to continue working through is saying, well, we've always done it this way. Things change. Technology, as we talked about earlier, has changed. So let's stay on top of that. So accountability, making sure we're accountable for our actions. So those are the type of things I want to instill into this program and carry forward. But first and foremost is making sure that we all are in this together. Yes, I'm the leader of this department, but everybody else has to do their job in order to have success.
It's amazing, isn't it, when you think about it? You're a kid growing up in Parkersburg. West Virginia is an Eastern Independent in football at that time. Back then, Atlantic 10 basketball was where West Virginia was.
Right.
I mean, in the time that has passed, so a quarter century and a little bit more, West Virginia goes to the Big East Conference. And now West Virginia, you come in here, and West Virginia, I mean, if you could have laid odds, buddy, that West Virginia would be in the Big 12 when you were a kid, someday, everyone would have taken all of that. And interestingly and coincidentally enough, it's a league that you've already been familiar with in Texas. Isn't that amazing? I mean, you've had to think about that and just kind of shake your head at how that thing's come around.
You do. You really do. And what's more ironic is being in the Big 12 before Texas Tech. You never thought, obviously, West Virginia would have the opportunity to be in this league. It's a great league. I mean, it's something that we should be very proud of. There's some great institutions. We saw that in football this year with TCU and Baylor almost making it to the playoff situation. The way we played, the names that are in this league, the Texas, the Oklahoma, the Kansas, the Iowa States, Kansas State, just, you name them all, and they have great reputations. And it's really great to be part of that. I think we should embrace that and continue working to have excellence in that area of all of our sports in the Big 12, and I think we will.
A couple more questions here. We really do appreciate your time. Shane Lyons, WVU's new athletic director, is with us here. Obviously, WVU is the outlier in this league geographically.
Right.
And, with the exception of geographics, has been a wonderful fit to this point. You know the schools intimately that are in the schools. Women's soccer has won a championship. Women's basketball won a regular season championship last year. Basketball, obviously, men's basketball right now is in the upper half and tied for second place, despite last night right now. Give me your overall picture of how big of a factor West Virginia can be in the Big 12 conference.
Well, I think there's growing pains like any conference, and obviously our obstacles being the furthest east institution, the travel that goes with that. But as you said, we've had success already within the league, and it's growing into that. I think obviously being here today talking about recruiting, I think your recruits are excited to be able to play in a conference such as the Big 12. So, it's a matter of having some growing pains and working through those. But without a question, I think that West Virginia will have a lot of success in the Big 12, and we'll just keep on plowing forward to see what we can do to help them.
What's the one thing or a couple things that you're most looking forward to in this new job?
Having pepperoni rolls?
No, you didn't get those in Alabama, huh?
No, not at all. I think the most forward is making this institution as great as I can make it. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier, is teamwork. And this is a great institution, both academically and athletically. And how can we work together and to keep on, as we talked about, is making this, a team. Our teams within the Big 12, a national contender, both within the conference as well as nationally. So that's what's most exciting, is how we can continue to grow, and it's the folks out there to help. It's, as I said, it's not just us, it's them. It's having the resources to be able to expand our facilities, to be able to recruit, have the right type of athletes come in here, and make us a national contender.
Last question for you. Straight up truth. Just how good of a player were you at Parkersburg High School?
Michael Forgale kind of, I think, as we get older, our mind gets a little bit foggier here, but I played, put it that way. I wouldn't say it was a standout. But it was,
any dunks in your days of the Big Reds?
With a volleyball, yeah. With a basketball, no. But it was a great experience. It's kind of cool that, since I'm coming back, a couple of the teammates I had in high school, Clyde Brewer was my the coach that ended, and he's having some health issues, and they had talked about getting assigned basketball because we were his first team that went through, and Coach Brewer was a great coach and great person, so it's good to be back and be closer to them and associated.
Sure.
But, the playing days were good. I would just put it that way.
I remember Coach Brewer. He was a great stomper on the side. He'd stomp that foot down, right? But some guys whistle, some guys yell. He stomped.
Yeah, I can still hear that at night every once in a while. The foot stomping and the Lions, stomping the foot and Lions. Not that I was in the wrong spot or anything.
No,
but,
not at all.
Yeah, but no, it was a great experience, and I look back, and as you said, it's kind of the full circle of being back in West Virginia is great, and but I don't miss that stomping the foot.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Well, listen, we're absolutely thrilled to have you.
Well, thank you.
We wish you the best, and we'll continue to follow this very important day because the fruit that's harvested today in the next couple of years will have big impact on this WVU football program.
That's absolutely right.
Thanks so much. Shane
All right,
Lyons, WVU's new AD, is with us. We invite you to stay tuned, folks. Hour number 1 is into the book. We got a lot more, 4 to go. A lot of commitments have come across. We continue to roll those down on the bottom line there. We'll be back with more. National Letter of Intent Signing Day 2015 is presented to you by United Bank.